one thing that I actually do, which really helps with this, is at the end of every year, like, so I have a running, just Google Sheets of every song I work on and the producer, and, you know, there's like money information for myself just to know how much I'm making on average per song throughout the year, and just like some stats for myself personally. But basically every year at the end of the year, I go through, make sure that's filled out properly. And then I also add a column where I call it like source of like where the work came from, like whether it was a specific person or whether it was like me working at a certain studio, or whether it was like my website or Instagram, like basically as specific as I can be, like my buddy Tim or Revolution or what, you know what I mean? And then I can sort and do like a calculation on percentage wise. I'll look and be like, where'd my work come from this year? And it's really cool because I can trace back every single gig to a specific action I took usually in my life, of like,
so smart. Yeah.
That client found me because 8 years ago I made those YouTube videos, and his buddy who's a producer saw one and DM'd me on Instagram, and then they saw me on like, I can look at them and like, I can be like, oh, that happened because of these specific actions I took. It's not random. You know what I mean? So yeah, I always kind of love that. It's also like a good, just to see that and be like, oh yeah, you're in control of your life. Like, it's not random. If you don't do anything, nothing happens, you know?
Yeah.
People
that's
won't
so
just
cool.
find you. There's like,
I love that.
100 other, there's like 100 guys that can mix your song, more than thousands of people that could mix your song. It's going to sound good, you know?
Yes.
Unless you're the Imagine Dragons Grammy guy or whatever, Back in Black guy. You just gotta be visible and do good work. But yeah, so a lot of
it's almost like planting all these seeds. You know what I mean? You plant a seed here, you plant a seed there, and some of them turn into trees, or eventually turn into trees, or, you know, in 3 years, you know, maybe something happens. But like, you never know.
That's literally about the timeline for a lot of things. Like when I first came here, I had free time. I was like trying to figure out work. We'd had some savings so we could like float ourselves for a few months or whatever. But we both just like, me and my wife just didn't have jobs, and we're like moved to a new city and didn't really know anyone. So it was like pretty stressy. And so one thing is like, I volunteered at a couple music festivals, and I ended up doing front of house in this tiny, it was like a bar with like one of those mixers that's like a power amp built into it, that just like, you know, like cheap, whatever, you plug a mic into it and it's the power amp, and you just get the speakers out of it, like a little, you know, a little PA for a bar.
Okay. Yeah.
So, you know, like just really get like super cheap, shitty, like no one needs to run this. But I was like, okay, cool. I'm a volunteer. They just want someone here to make sure the equipment works. And this one guy got up and played, and he was like incredible, like just an acoustic guitar kind of folk, like kind of thing. And so I just talked to him. I was like, hey man, I really loved your set. Like, it was incredible. Like, I'm so glad you played today. This was like made it worth me even doing this. And he was like, oh, it's so nice. And then I followed up later on Instagram or whatever and just like DM'd him. I was like, hey man, just want to say hi. I loved your thing. No sales pitch. No, like, I want to mix your record or record you. Just, But I made sure that it was obvious if he looked what I did. So I made sure my bio had a link in it. Whatever, like my email had a signature that said I was an engineer. And sure enough, like 2 months later, he's like, hey, I noticed you work out of the studio. I might be looking to record something. I was like, yeah, hit me up whenever. And then like 2 years later, we do an album. And it's like, an album's not enough to pay 2 years of rent. But if you're just planting those seeds every day, everywhere, eventually enough of them come up that you're like, oh, I'm doing this now.
Yeah, you know? It's amazing. I think people it takes persistence, time. And I feel like so many people get bogged down and discouraged, and it's really, there's no other way to do it. It's just to persist long enough. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like you got to be doing this for like at least 5 years to start to see, you know, fruits of your labors. You know what I mean? Like, you know? Yeah.
Oh, I forget how long actually, but if you consider, I forget what year I started at the studio, 2013 or 14 maybe? 2007? I don't know. Anyway, whatever. It's been like, 16 years or something, 15 years since I started trying to do this. I wouldn't say that I made even like, I'm not like rolling in it, but I'm like doing fine now. Like I can, I'm doing better than I ever thought I would. I'll put it that way. It's like,
it's like amazing.
Not like, I'm not driving like a Bentley, but like, I'm not worried about buying coffees and like I can pay, we live in a nice place now and like everything's pretty good. But I didn't get even close to that until maybe in the last 5 years. So like I was doing this more than a decade before it felt somewhat possible to keep doing this forever.
Yeah. No,
like, I mean? It's a grind.
I'm 100% with you. I'm about a decade into this, maybe a little bit more. And I'm finally also myself just seeing all the little things that I've done kind of colliding. It's kind of bizarre. It's like, oh, I worked really hard on that for this many years, and I worked hard on this for this many years, and I've been doing this podcast now for 2.5 years, and like all of a sudden, all these like little things kind of collide, and you realize that this pushing you to like something that's bigger than the sum of its parts. Finally, but it's literally 100%. It's like a decade in the making, and I think I guess the takeaway for the audience is just like you have to just keep at it and keep planting those seeds. You know what I mean? Like and.
Totally.
It's hard to know when not to give up, but you have to just not give up, you know?
But also it's different for everybody. Some people are happier giving up. You know what I mean? Like it's a kind of a crazy thing to do. And like what I've actually been talking with a few different, like friends that are also engineers and stuff the last year about this, where it's really like the subjective nature of, especially when you get into mixing and mastering, like the subjective nature of the job paired with the fact that you're kind of making decisions in a bubble that other people still have to like. You have to, they have to like, and the artist obviously has to like the mix you did, but most of the time they're not there when you're doing it unless you live in LA or whatever. It takes a certain kind of mindset and just like a certain kind of person to be able to deal with that, because it's it can be so frustrating, right? Like I could do a mix, and I could do this similar aesthetic, like maybe I'm in we all go through phases with things we like. Maybe I'm in this like maybe a bit too much low end phase where I like things really thick and like bumping, and like it's cool and I don't regret doing it on things, but like I go in and out of that sometimes, right? And sure. You send that to one client and they might be like, this is sick, like my car speakers, like they didn't blow up, but it was like big and they love it. And one person might be like, what did you do? Like all I can hear is bass, like the vocals sound small now, I hate it. And like it's subjective. It's art. You know what I mean? Like
so subjective.
Like it can drive you nuts unless you can deal with it.